Myers Park was first conceptualised during World War I, and it was the idea of the mayor at the time. His name was C.J. Parr. He was an early advocate of town planning, and in that period when they talked about town planning, it tended to encapsulate ideas about improved housing conditions as well as creating new open spaces in the city. They kind of linked it to slum rhetoric, and they talked about particular housing areas as being slums, even though when we look at that terminology today, it's sometimes quite inappropriate. So Parr had the idea that he would open up this area through what was then called the Grey Street Gully, just adjacent to what we now know as Gray's Avenue up the top of the hill, and decided that if he could raise lots of money, he could buy up the land from 25 different owners, demolish about 14 buildings and create an urban park. So an urban park would be like a breathing space for the city. And the person he approached to fund it was a man called Arthur Myers. And Arthur was an earlier mayor of Auckland, and he was a businessman, a brewer. He is Kenneth Myers' father, Douglas Myers' grandfather. Arthur Myers and his wife Vera decided that they would fund this park, not only the park, but also contribute a playground and kindergarten that you can see behind me. So the park was opened in 1915, and the kindergarten and the playground came a year later. They were opened in 1916. And it's really interesting looking back through the records and thinking about why they wanted to create a park and a kindergarten during World War I. And the language is very much aligned to World War I, and sort of by trying to create a healthier, cleaner, fresher city, that you would bring up fitter imperial citizens, so raising up little children to be better behaved but also physically fitter, and also to have better morals, because they were taking children off the street and putting them into the learning environment of a kindergarten and the supervised environment of a playground. In 1935, the government launched a national housing survey to establish the extent of overcrowding and substandard living conditions in New Zealand cities. And it revealed that approximately 25% of Auckland's housing was considered to be unsatisfactory. There were two parts of the city that were really focused on as having the worst slums. One was Gray's Avenue, and the other was Airedale Street, just on the other side of Queen Street. And the maps, one particular map that was conducted, that was the result of the housing survey, it uses different colours to demonstrate the different standards of the housing. So blue was used for houses that were considered to be partially satisfactory, whereas red was used to show up the houses that they considered in need of demolition. But then a third type of graphic that was added to the map is a red cross through some of those sites, and the red cross identifies Asiatics who were resident in these buildings. And so when we look at this map for the Gray's Avenue area, we can see the Chinatown cluster at the bottom of the street, as indicated by all of the red crosses, but also quite a cluster of houses that were considered to be either partially satisfactory or unsatisfactory and in need of demolition. So this map was of real interest to me for what it reveals also about sites further up Gray's Avenue, the sites that were cleared for state housing. And the state housing in Gray's Ave was a collaborative initiative between the Auckland City Council and central government. The council first had the idea to build public housing in Gray's Avenue in the 30s, and part of their land was cleared. The houses were demolished as early as the 1930s. But then from 1936, when the Labour government announced its national housing program, the Auckland City Council convinced the Labour government that Gray's Ave should be one of the sites for urban housing,